Welcome everyone to 21st Century Saints, a podcast and live stream series for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, members, those affiliated with us, those adjacent to the church. This is a podcast for everyone in the UK, around the world, and we are so excited to be here with, we have our regular co-host Alana.
Hey.
Do you want to say hi? Can you all hear her voice is sounding better? Everyone was so worried about you last week.
I know.
With lots of
Still a
lovely
little bit husky, but it's better than it was.
Yeah, you still have your husky voice. So again, Alana does still have allergies. So if Alana mutes out or has to disappear, or she has a coughing fit, when you have an especially super coughing fit, we get loads of messages like just making sure that you're like, why are you doing this? You are definitely fine to do this, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Like I am going to be there. Before we introduce our guest as well, I'm just going to let everyone know that Alana is also keeping a little eye on the phone in the background. So in the event, although you're on airplane mode, in the event there's a little bit of interference, you want to tell us what you're keeping your phone on for?
Yeah, my nephew and his wife are currently at a hospital having a baby. So I'm just waiting for the news. So I'm quite excited. It is their first, yeah.
Everyone's really excited. What else do we have? We also have some news. We want to, you guys will all get to meet her pretty soon, but we also want to welcome Rachel to the 21st Century Saints team. We mentioned Rachel last week, but you'll get to meet her properly. Rachel's taking care of all of our social media needs and looking out for how we can be better. So if you have anything that you would like us to cover or address, please do get in touch and let us know. We would encourage you to stay in touch by liking our page on Facebook or subscribing to our page on YouTube, and then you can stay in touch with everything that we're getting up to. Other announcements, if you are around the Sunstone UK page tonight, I think at the same time as us, I think this may be happening simultaneously, but you can catch up. They're doing a great interview tonight. So do check out their page. And apart from that, shall we jump in and introduce our guest tonight? Welcome, Susie Augenstein. Okay, can you? I'm not used to saying your last name. Augenstein.
Augenstein.
Susie Augenstein. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's Augenstein, but if I was in Germany, it would be Augenstein.
Oh, so really?
Okay. That might be a little more familiar in your guys' area of pronunciation.
Well, it's great to meet you properly because I've been telling Alana about you and I'm excited. Alana's kind of representing our audience. We're going to get to know a little bit about you. This is the first time we've been able to actually speak, but we've been friends on Facebook for maybe, I think about 4 years now. Mm-hmm. And what I'd like to do is to just kind of talk for a little minute about where you were up until the point 4 years ago when you start posting some what I felt was pretty cool content. This is someone I want to know more. So I sent you a friend request. Could you take us back to that time and give us a bio of who you are, what you're up to then?
Kind of right before I started posting a lot about LGBT stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I will try to give you the very brief description of that. I would say about 10 years ago now, I kind of started a journey that was just purely my own journey. I felt very guided. Actually, one day I just woke up and said to myself, I wonder what it would feel like to be a parent of a gay child or an LGBTQ child. I just remember I just had that feeling. And I, for some reason, just started looking around to see if I could find someone that had a gay child. And there was nothing at the time except for one family that was in a town called Logan. And I started kind of reading up on them. And I was like, it was a really weird feeling because I had nothing in my life that would make me want to do that. So I just started kind of learning about it. And I asked my husband, like, what would we do if we had a gay child? And we kind of started that conversation. Well, about a year into that kind of search and that, I, for some reason, just thought, oh my gosh, I bet you I'm being guided because I'm going to have one of my kids come out. So then I did some funny things with my kids, like, hey, if you had a friend that was gay, do you think they'd feel comfortable telling their parents? And my kids thought I was weird, like, yeah. And, you know, or they would just say different things. And I was trying to almost see if one of them was going to come out. And we have kind of a running joke now, because at Christmas time, they'll be like, we know what mom wants. She wants one of us to come out at Christmas, you know, so we had this kind of joke, because I seriously thought I was being kind of prepared for a child to come out, which didn't happen. And then this story, we're moving through the years. I'm still kind of going on this journey. My son was serving a mission, or was about to go to Brazil on a mission. And he was struggling. He wanted to come home before he left there. He was in California, and we were all kind of praying for him. And he had an excellent mission president in California on his visa wait, who was just like, if you want to go home, I support you. He didn't shame him. He was awesome. And we just said to my son, I'm like, if you can give it some more time, you know, just try to give it a little bit more time. So, but I really thought he was coming home. And so I was preparing for him to come home. And all of a sudden, my son messaged me and said, nope, I think I'm going to head down to Brazil and give it some time. And so I was at a soccer tournament in another state here. And at that time, it was still tenuous. So I thought he was coming home. So my phone was on, and I thought, if he calls me from the airport, I'm going to be prepared. Well, I saw a foreign number come on thinking it was him, but instead it was a flight attendant who was on his flight. And she started to kind of get really emotional. And she said, I met your son, and it was such a privilege to meet him. He was just a beautiful human. And I start crying, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I think he's coming home, and he has this amazing flight attendant who just nurtured him and took care of him. So I start crying, saying, you have no idea what this week's been like. And then she starts crying. You know how vulnerability helps vulnerability. And she's like, just so you know, I am gay. And my mom always says, reach out to the missionaries. And I have a girlfriend and blah, blah, blah. So I just got to know this person right out of the blue that shared this with me. And we became friends. I became friends with her mom. When she moved back to Utah, she'd married her wife, and I hadn't met her yet, but she calls me and said, we're having a baby shower. My wife's going to have a baby. Would you come? So my daughter and I went over just 5 minutes from our house, and we walked into this amazing, beautiful, loving baby shower. There was church music playing in the background. Like, I was like, what planet have I just landed on? And I watched this big Mormon family embrace their daughter and her wife and this new baby that was coming. And I was like, I went to stage 2. It was like I was just entering different stages of learning. And so it kind of started there. Then I started volunteering at some places here, and my husband was serving as bishop. And all of a sudden, after getting to know so many people at this point, Elder Ballard had put out that statement, said we need to listen to understand our LGBT loved ones. And so we just took it as a green light. And all of these people that we knew, we said, let's have a meeting. And my husband set it up in our stake. He got permission to do it in our ward. And we ended up 4 years ago, almost 3.5 years ago, having a meeting that was miraculous. We had 2 gay men that were still in the church speak. We had my friends that did this organization that lost their son to suicide speak. We had 2 couples, married lesbian couples. Morgan talked about how awesome her family was. And then the other couple talked about how her family didn't accept her at all. And all my husband did in this meeting is he gathered everyone in for 2 hours, and he said, we are here to listen. We're not here to have a doctrinal discussion. We're not here to have a question and answer. The only thing you're going to do is listen to stories. You couldn't hear a pin drop. So I mentioned it to a few of our LGBTQ friends. I said, if you want a safe meeting, if you want to feel connection and love, this is the meeting to come to. They shot out word, and an extra 140 people from the LGBT community came to that meeting, lined the walls, all colors of skin, all kinds of dress, just a beautiful meeting. And at the end, we have an older population in our ward. Our members went up and just cried and shook hands and hugged. It was this amazing thing. We don't know. Yeah, it was just amazing. So that was the start of kind of a journey that I was like, okay, this is part of our life's mission. I mean,
I'm going to jump in here and ask about, because I want to know more about this meeting, because this became key for me, hearing about what you're doing. That's how I'm hearing about what's happening in a whole other country from another, that's the kind of impact. So tell me, how are you experiencing for yourself? How are you experiencing church at this point? What kind of callings do you hold? And what's it like for you?
I don't hold a calling, and I particularly don't do that on purpose because I have a calling. And I think that callings, and sometimes people don't understand that. You know, we have a lot of people that can take care of each other here in Utah, but we don't have a lot of people that can care for the people that feel like they don't belong. And there isn't a day that goes by in the last 4 years since all of that happened, because we formed a Sunday class, non-denominational, just because we want kids to feel like they belong. When you don't belong somewhere, Mormons are awesome at creating community until you don't fit in. And then when you don't fit in that community, you feel lost and you feel like you don't belong. So we feel like our calling is to create places of belonging. So we have game nights, we have Sunday classes. Like I have a lesbian night coming this next Wednesday of all these girls that want to get together and play games. So I don't hold a calling, and I've made it very clear that that's not something I'm going to be doing right now because I have a calling. Every day I'm going to lunch with 2 kids that just reached out to me next week. I have parents reach out that say, I don't know where I fit in. And so we make time for them. So to answer your question, I don't necessarily fit in the general ward, the typical Mormon wards here, but I have a big vision, a big tent, big gospel, big, that kind of stuff. It's expansive to me. Institution means nothing to me anymore. Big gospel means everything to me.
Love that.
Some people love that, some people don't.
Yeah. And well, because it's quite a scary idea if you're presented, if the church works for you, if you feel like you belong, it's quite scary to think about, turning that on its head and coming out of that comfortable area. So if you are thinking about people wanting to make a comfortable place for everyone, is any of that driven by you feeling uncomfortable, or how do you feel that you fit in?
Oh, 100%. I think every single one of us at some point have said or done something that we wish we hadn't, because that's all we knew then. My biggest thing is when you know better, you do better. So I have no problem with saying that maybe 10 years ago, I said something that could have been hurtful because I didn't know better. But I think people live in that place and they don't know how to shift or admit. Pride is big with us, especially in our institutional phase. We don't want to say, oh, I was once a person that maybe hurt someone's feelings. But I think there's power in saying, yeah, I probably was, and I'm going to shift. So what was the other part of that question that you asked?
I guess really I'm thinking about have you always felt like you're a part of the community? Is that what's driving you to think of others?
Oh, yeah. As far as belonging and a part, no, but I've always been a member of the church, but I've always been an outlier. So for me, my dad always said, he taught me growing up, your ward is a forced boundary of people you're forced to worship with, And so I was very community driven. And so a lot of times growing up in my ward, people would be like, why aren't you showing up to the ward functions or this or that all the time? And I'm like, because it's not my whole life. Because the gospel of Christ was my whole life, but my ward boundary wasn't my whole life. So I didn't always fit into those places so comfortably where people their ward boundary is everything, or the church building is everything. And I'm just different because I'm the one that would raise my hand in a Relief Society lesson when the topic went off course, and I would say, hey, why don't we think about it this way? Why are we worried about double pierced ears? Like, why is that our concern? So I was the one that would do that. And so for a lot of people, they would be like, I'm so glad you said that. But then there's the ones that are like, she seemed a little dangerous, Yeah. And so, yeah, I didn't always fit, but I didn't really care that I fit. Okay. I would say more today, sometimes, because when you make shifts, sometimes it's difficult because people don't understand why you make a shift. They make assumptions. They think that you're digressing or assume that you're digressing when you know that you're actually progressing, that you're getting to kind of a higher level of thought religious, a faith transition doesn't mean leaving. It means growing, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And so being I'm kind of a fringe person. Like I'm going to keep my foot there. I'm always going to be a Mormon. And I love my upbringing. It's the language. It's where I learned to talk to my heavenly parents. It's the language I learned, and it's beautiful and has beautiful truths. But I'm also one that pushes a little bit and says, you know, we don't have a corner on everything. There's truth in all sorts of places, but we have a beautiful place that we can build upon what we have. So I don't know if that answers your question. So yeah, I'm not always the one that fits in perfectly, but I think I perfectly fit in where I need to be. So
the way I've experienced church is as a convert. So I don't necessarily always get the it's not all I've ever known. I have options. So when I sort of have ever felt that there's a need or that there are marginalized voices that aren't being represented, I've generally been quite comfortable to do that, recognizing that it's not a fun experience to, you know, be the only one. Right. But Alana, you know, you were raised in the church, and you now I would say seem to everyone like you are an absolute cultural fit. Your family are organising all of the activities, events. We have so few families that are you know here. You know that you guys made up like half of the church, right? But yeah, that feeling of not belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt that way quite a lot. I mean, I guess, you know, growing up in the church, you have this idea of who you should be and how you should be, but I just never truly felt that I was good enough a lot of the time. And I don't know, it's hard to explain what I'm trying to say. Like, I just never felt I came up to the standard that was needed. So then it started causing me to have a lot of not so much self-confidence and things like that. So it was pretty difficult. Obviously, there were other reasons, as anyone who listened to my life story podcast will know, you know, my childhood played a big part in that not feeling of belonging. But I do definitely say that the church played a part in that as well.
And so what I find quite fascinating is that, so I am speaking with, you know, we have two women that I'm speaking with who have, rather than focused on what you need, you are seeing that there is a need for other people to feel comfortable too. You're sort of reaching out with your own experience. And that, I find that fascinating. So I love how you've talked about what brought you to the point where you're specifically thinking about LGBTQ voices. So this incredible, now what is it? Is it a conference? Is it a devotional? What? How did you guys frame it?
That we do on Sundays?
The one that you did about 3.5 years ago. What?
It was so back when we had the 3-hour blocks. It's kind of like a fifth Sunday.
It was a fifth Sunday. Okay.
We just took 2 full hours. We only went to sacrament meeting, and we took the entire 2 full hours, and we just listened to stories. And it was in fact, it's funny that you heard about it, because you know what happened after that? Like, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. The reason my husband wouldn't do it as a devotional at night is because he knew that if you say, oh, we're going to have a thing on how to listen to our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, you're going to get the people that want to be there, but you're not going to get people showing up that are opposed to that. So he's like, I'm doing it during church. and he sent out a thing kind of explaining a little bit, but he wanted them to understand. And you know, it was so beautiful. At the end of that meeting, in fact, Kyle Ashworth has put our meeting to a beautiful content. I'll share it to you. It has all the talks and everything. But my husband, at the end of the meeting, he turned to everyone and he talked about a scripture that was something about who are your brothers and sisters. I can't remember where it was right in the Bible. And right after he said that scripture, he looked at the audience and he says, if you feel comfortable, if you are, or you have a loved one that is LGBTQ, I want you to stand. And it was like this whoosh of people standing. And where everyone's looking around like, oh my gosh, so many people are connected to either someone they love or someone that's LGBT. And he just held out his hands and he said, these are your brothers and sisters. And it was just like chilling. And so when that meeting was over, I didn't realize that just a few posts about it were going crazy. And I spent the next 2 weeks, my thumb hurts because I was getting messages from everywhere. In fact, I went to the church office bill. I wrote a letter to Elder Holland because misquotes were getting out there too. A lot of misinformation on what this is. So I got all the talks. I got all the letters from people all over. I got my own thing, and I just sent a letter and I said, I know you guys know about this because it was approved. And I said, and I know it's gaining attention. So if you want to talk to someone, talk to me. And I went, President Holland sent me, within 2 days, his secretary called me, and he was leaving on the tour with President Nilsson. I don't know, you know, when he was that world tour that they did. So I met with Paul, and I went down to the church office building, and we gave them all of the stuff. And I said, I am an open book. You can talk to me about this. Because in actuality, that meeting, in some regards, some people think it shouldn't have happened, because we had people that we got all of it approved, but we had people speaking that weren't members of the church anymore, obviously, because they were in married same-sex relationships. And a lot of times you have to get approval from bishops or people like that. I just think God orchestrated it to happen, because we literally sent out a text to all these people and said, do you want to participate? And they said, yes. 2 months later, we texted it a week before. Are you ready to go? They said, yes. And it just happened. There was no magical thing that made it happen. It just happened. And it caused a stir, because 99% were beautiful with it. But we did get, we got a letter that was they didn't sign their name. Someone in our ward, they didn't sign their name. And my husband's like, I'm not going to address a letter when someone doesn't sign their name. Sign your name, come talk to me about it. We'll talk about it. But if you're not going to sign your name, it's a waste of my time. But so it did create this stir that went on. I mean, I met right after, you guys know Carolyn Pearson, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. She called me and she's like, how did you guys do this? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, people are doing this all the time. We just said, let's have a meeting because Elder Ballard said we should listen. So we followed his advice to listen.
So you're sending out these texts. Does anyone express concern about how it's going to be received?
As we're planning it, you mean?
Yeah.
The people that
you're asking. Yeah, I'm really sorry. And I appreciate whenever you ask me to clarify, because I'm not always very clear. So thank you for doing that.
The people that we asked, it's kind of like we all felt the Spirit saying, this is the right thing to do. And all we said to them was, speak from your heart. Like, we just need you to speak from your heart. People need to hear this. And so it was weird. Nobody asked for their talks. We didn't check their talks. Maybe we should have, but we didn't. And they were raw, and they were honest, and they were heartfelt. I mean, Morgan, my friend that's the flight attendant, her mom spoke about how she found Morgan almost dead out by the temple. She had tried to take her life, and what that did in their family. And then the other girl that spoke that was married talked about how her mom won't even let her wife in her house. And she read a letter to her mom. And I mean, it was so profound that you couldn't deny that the heavens arranged it. But the problem is as humans, we like we like to keep people, I call it at the level 3 in our faith, in any faith, the checkbox level. We're going to stay at the checkbox level. And when you extend, have you seen Jana Spangler's Faith Transitions podcast about faith? Mm-hmm. You know, when you hit a 4, the 4s don't like the 3s, because the 4s have expanded beyond the checkbox. The 3s don't like the 4s, because, you know, you're kind of at this thing like, I want to be here, but I'm not a checkbox Mormon anymore. And they're saying, well, I don't want you to be here because you're not a checkbox Mormon. But then the 5s, which my husband is, I go back and forth, like, I'm trying to get to the 5, but I get to be an angry 4 or a peaceful 4, depends on my mood. But my husband's a 5, definitely a 5. And he's one that sees the big picture of all of it. How we need to go through those things. We need to learn rules. We need to learn it's like teaching a kid not to cross the street when he's little. We need to go through those things. But what our faith preaches from the gospel, from theology, we preach it all the time. But from actual action, we want to keep people at a 3. And keeping people at a 3 doesn't allow for growth. And it also is a little bit dangerous to get people to 4s, because they expand their vision of what the true gospel means. So
Yep.
It's this tricky place. But it was a beautiful meeting, and it happened. And then it caused some waves after.
Can I just ask, I'm not sure if I missed that. So what is the 5? I don't know if I missed that or if I'm just not up to speed with what's going on.
The wonderful thing about Alana is Alana will, when we start to get into the speak of nuanced or progressive Mormon world, Alana will stop us and be like, what are you all talking about? Explain it to
Like, obviously I got what the 3 and 4, but I don't know if I missed the 5 or if maybe it wasn't explained. I'm not sure.
So I encourage you, if you can get on Richard Osler's podcast, Janice Spangler did an amazing thing on the faith transitions that people go through. And it's not just a Mormon thing. It's how you kind of go through life. A 6 is a Mother Teresa. None of us are going to be a 6 or a Gandhi or whatever, but a 5 is kind of when you see beauty in everyone's place. You see the beauty in the 3s. You see the beauty in the 4s. It's why my husband can go to church and not let things bother him. He can see me. Like I said, he gave me, where's my tattoo? This was my 50th birthday present for my husband, our past bishop. He doesn't even apologize for it. He sees stuff so far beyond and in such an enlightened way that he doesn't care what people say or do. He knows what the big picture is. And it's why he can be in those spaces even easier than I can at times. And it's a goal. I mean, I think we can all get there. And it doesn't mean we're active in our churches at all the time, or it doesn't mean whatever. It just means that you can embrace the big picture of knowing why people are where they're at. Some people stay in 3s their whole life, and they're faithful, good members of the church. And they're there. The beauty is could we all be in this space and love each other where we're at? Can I go? I mean, I can give you this perfect example. Like when my husband was bishop, you see my cute little 2 double earrings. I had one back in the 80s, let it grow in like everyone did at the time when the prophet said not to wear them. But I had, when I was a young women's leader, I had one of my niece, it happened to my niece, one of my kids, where some kids saw their double earrings and made them feel like they couldn't be there. Like my niece was ready to go on a mission. She had gone away from the church, came back, and she ran into a lady at her work at Zupa's. She saw a young women's group come in, and she said to him, "Oh my gosh, you're coming from the temple. I'm going on a mission." She had a leader say to her, "How could someone with double pierced earrings be talking about the sacredness of the temple?" That happened to my niece. Devastated her. So I found out it happened with one of my Laurels. I was at my brother-in-law's, he's a doctor, and we were talking about it, and he said, "Do you want me to double pierce your ears?" I'm like, "Yes." and this is while my husband's the bishop. I'm like, "Yes." And I made an object lesson in Young Women's, and I held up a sign that was, I don't know how it is there, but when you're picketing a business, when you say the business is doing something wrong. So I put a sign up that said, "I want my job back." And I said, here's someone that's opening this and saying, "I want my job back." And I said, "Who do you think this is?" And my young women were like, "I don't know." And I said, "It's God. This is God. He's saying, I want my job back." I said, because God is the person that can judge, because he's really good at it. He knows us from the beginning of our lives, before our lives, after our lives. He knows the heartaches. He knows our stories. So he's going to be the most benevolent and kind judge to us. And it's going to be beautiful. I said, the reason he tells us not to judge because we're not good at it. But he does tell us to do 2 things. He tells us to love him and our Heavenly Mother, our Heavenly Parents, and he tells us to love our neighbor, because those are the 2 things that we can do. And so at the end of my lesson, I put my thing back like this, and I showed everyone my earrings, and I said, so I have a challenge. How about we don't look here anymore? How about we look here? Let's try to look here. And so, and that's how I feel. It just doesn't matter. I walked out of a Relief Society lesson because I had it once. My hair was pulled back. This was a few years later after my husband had been released. And someone was talking about gifts of Jesus, of Christ, how we can be more like him. Another lady raised her hand that wasn't even in our ward and said, well, let's talk about what draws us away from Christ. And she says, what about those people with double pierced earrings? If you can't obey the small things, how can you obey the big things? I literally was on the front row, and at that point I couldn't handle it, but I sent a bigger message. I just stood up and I walked out. But I have 4 amazing older women in my ward that have softened their hearts through all of this. I call them my bags, which means badass grannies. So I call them my bags. And their hearts have changed. And I watched this one little older woman look at me like, Susie, aren't you going to raise your hand after that comment? She wanted me to be the one again to raise my hand, but I walked out. She called me later and she said, you should have stayed. You should have seen what happened. She raised her hand, this cute little quiet granny. And she said, I just don't really think double pierced ears are going to keep us out of heaven. Do you know that someone just walked out of this meeting because of what was said? And she was amazing. So it's just interesting to me that we look at things that don't matter, you know, because we're conditioned to say, yep. Oh, I'm a little bit better than you because I don't have double pierced ears and I can gauge my righteousness based on that. It doesn't matter, you know. So
see, I think that's something I'm just saying, I think that's something I've struggled with a lot, like, is other people feeling in the church that they have the right to comment on what you're wearing. Like, you know, I've said this before, when I was younger, I got spoken to by a lady who I absolutely love and adore, about the fact I had trousers on one week, and I just blatantly said to her, would you rather I was here or would you rather I stayed home because I didn't have a dress? You know, and I think that's something that really irritates me. You know, what does it matter if you've got 2 ear piercings? What does it matter if I've got, I can't even show it now, a tattoo now? You know, it shouldn't matter, because that's not what's important. Like you said, you know, I don't believe any of these things are God's going to say, sorry, you can't get into heaven because you've got a tattoo, because you've got double pierced ears. Like I've said to Jane in the past, it is what's in your heart. It's what the good that you do, the things that you do for you, for others. And I just think that's something that really needs to change within the church, that people, and again, you know, I've, like you said, you know, we're kind of conditioned that way and we feel we have to say, but members need to learn that it's not our responsibility to speak to other people about what they're wearing, or tattoos, or double pierced ears, or whatever the issue may be. We just need to be looking at what we need to be doing instead of looking at what others aren't doing.
Right. I think the other interesting thing for me is that we can say these are small things, right? But actually they become really big things when you think that if this is how we feel over piercings, over a tattoo, what happens when it's the fact that I cannot understand how I'm going to be someone who's going to look like they belong in the celestial kingdom? What happens when it's the fact that my breasts make me feel like I'm not in my own body? What happens when it's a relationship that will never look the way you think it should look? So if we get judgment over ear piercings, yes, what happens next? So tell me what happened next. Take me into the next stage after.
So after that, I, like anything, when something big happens, it's got a shelf life. It's going to go away. It's the news story of the day. And I was like, this attention that's coming here is going to go away. And I was like, I don't want these stories to stop. So I made a page at the time called Let's Love Better. And I started adding to the different places that were adding stories. And my goal was to ask people, what was wonderful about your religious upbringing, but what was difficult about it? Let's talk about both sides. I'm not the kind of person, I hate camps. I'm a Mormon, I'm a post-Mormon, I'm this, I'm that. I hate camps. I think we should belong to the human camp. And so I started that, and that happened for a couple years of getting some of those stories out. But as I was going, these kids, we started a game night just with some kids that we met. We called it Settler Sunday, and it was 15 LGBT kids that met at our house once a month. Well, now that list has like 500 on it. And so it, not that everybody comes, but it just kept going and going. And so we started these game nights. And then all of a sudden, us and the Doysons, who did a Dine and Dash, who are the ones over Peculiar, I said to him one day, I said, this is so difficult. These kids want to feel connected and they want to belong. And a lot of them really miss Sundays. These LGBT kids are some of our most spiritual kids. They are the stars in our religion as far as everything that they've done. And so then we were like, okay, if they can't feel comfortable there, let's make a place comfortable here. So we started a Sunday class that we called Love and Lift Inspirational Sunday. And the basic for that class was that anyone can come. You don't even have to have a belief in God. You just need to be here so you can feel connection. And our goal was 42 teachers that are all LGBTQ. Pick me, I want to teach, return missionaries, all of these things that they wanted to teach. And they came with these beautiful lessons from Brene Brown or from Gandhi or from Christ. And we started the class with, you don't have to believe in Christ, but can we agree that we're trying to uplift? We're sharing stories that will uplift, because isn't that what we want from church? Isn't that the purpose that we go at the beginning of the week so we can feel uplifted to carry on through the week, even though sometimes we don't get that at church? So we started those classes, up until COVID, we were doing them every single week. And then things just grew so that we were developing places of trust. And so parents, like at the time I had that meeting, one of the first phone calls I got was a mom whose husband was bishop at the time, 2 kids in her family, they're LGBT. And she's like, how are you navigating it? For me, I'm unusual because people will say, I can't believe, Susie, you entered this space without having a gay kid. But I think that's probably why I was led into this space, because it's really easy to all of a sudden start to understand it when your kid comes out. But boy, it's really hard to get people to understand it that don't have to be in that space. So my goal is, there's a million people like me out there. They're all over, and I meet them all the time because they feel inspired to be in this space too. But the goal is, like a peculiar, is to develop allyship. And I tell
me what an ally is. What does an ally need to? What are the LGBTQIA plus community asking for us to be?
They're asking for us to show up, to support them in any places where we're at, like in our church communities. Like when I go to church, a lot of times I invite like 15 of my friends that are LGBT, if I know there's going to be a safe meeting, because I know they need to see people learning to care about them. These kids, so that people in our church and in any institution need to understand one thing about them. It is really, really easy to love something you understand or someone you understand. But Christ asked us to live the higher law. And the higher law asks us to love things that we don't always understand and to find a place for them. Because how do we become more like our Savior if all we're doing is loving things and participating in things that we understand? So I tell these kids all the time, I'm like, you guys are bringing in the Savior. In my opinion, you are allowing us as members of the God's human family to rise to that what Christ asked us when he came. I want you to live the higher law. I said, you are the ones that are bringing us to our knees and helping us to understand how to love better. And that's all it really is how are we going to figure out how to love? And you know how you figure it out? You stand in places with them. You go out to lunch with them. You invite their parents over. You create places where you can listen to their stories. And as soon as you listen, you're sold. It's over. I've seen it happen time and time again. I've seen the person coming in to one of our meetings and they're like, I don't think I can do this. And by the end of our meetings, crying and saying, I'm your number one ally. It's so easy, but it's like missionary work. I love it because I never served a mission for our church. And I'm like, I can knock on doors every day of the week trying to get people to become allies. So
I love thinking about that way to approach it as missionary work. I think that's beautiful. Tell me what does the Latter-day Saint community need to know about the experience of our LGBTQIA brothers and sisters and siblings?
They need to understand that the path that they walk, nobody in their right mind would wake up any day of the week in the world that we at least have lived in the past, and it's getting better. Nobody would wake up and say, hey, I feel like being gay today, or I feel like being trans today because I just can't wait for people to bully me. I just can't wait to be in a space where people, say things, don't want to give me jobs, or don't want me to be a parent, or don't want me to what. they're not, number one, they're not making it up. There's no reason anyone would choose to make that up. They want us to just listen, and they want us, like, you know what was the hardest thing I ever heard? We were having these game nights where my husband was bishop. These kids would come in and they'd find out my husband was bishop, and the first thing they would say is, I can't believe you want to talk to me. You're a bishop. Why would you want to talk to me? And then we would ask them to go on double dates. We're like, oh my gosh, you're dating someone. Let's go out. And they would be like, you want to be seen with us? Like, you're a bishop and you want to be seen with us, like on a double date? And I'm like, yeah, we don't care what other people think. But the fact that they were that they even had to say that, the fact they even had to say, really, you really want to be with us? Like, it broke my heart. And I was like, what are we doing as a human family and as a body of Christ, that we are separating ourselves? I don't care what people think about doctrine, like what the doctrine is currently saying. It's not what the gospel said. It is not what our Savior did. It is not. He hung with the marginalized all the time, and he was ridiculed for it. So at that point, I say, I mean, I'm a little feisty now, but I say, bring it. If the church wants to do anything to me, bring it, because I know who I answer to. And we all should get to the point where we know who we answer to. I would like to do it within the body of Christ. I would like to help us all get to that place. I can do that with or without the institution, because at the end of the day, it's about the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's about the human family rising together. So, I mean, I get off tangent. I know that kind of went off. I don't know how.
That's beautifully put. Thank you so much. I guess what I'm just really impacted by what you're telling me. Tell me, is there any indication that what you post, that your work could potentially be problematic for the church organization?
Yeah.
I know that certainly 3.5 years ago, it was enough to make people across the world take notice. Today, it's still incredibly impactful, but you know, the conversation is happening with or without you. This work is happening. You're holding a really interesting position in this space. So what is that looking like? How is it being received by the church?
Well, it just depends. Leadership roulette is a real deal thing in the church. I am an open book. I'm performing I'm officiating my third wedding this summer of people that have asked me to officiate their weddings. Another lesbian couple, returned missionary, cute, wonderful women. I know that can ruffle a few feathers, and not just because of that, it's because I'm a woman doing it too. So I have two spaces that people kind of look like, because I went to another wedding where it was his father-in-law that married him, and he was in the bishopric, and he doesn't get it. So yeah, I have hit some things, and I have had to realize that. I'll just give you a clear example. I went to get my temple recommend 2 years ago, and and my husband was not the bishop anymore. He had finished his 5.5 years, and I got through all the questions, and all of a sudden my bishop wanted to enter back to, like, do I sustain the church leaders in the doctrine? And I was like, I answered the question. And so I said, I'm an open book, so why are you asking me this question again? And so he asked, so I said, so ask it, I'll answer it. So he asked, and I said, I'll tell you how I do that. I said, because I don't have to agree with the leaders to sustain them. I don't have to. And I said, and number two, you know how I sustain them? I pray every night for them to seek for further light and understanding for all of God's children. And I scooted my recommend over. And he probably was not wanting to sign it at the time, but at that time when I wanted my recommend, I was like, the only one that's going to take my recommend away from me is going to be me. And actually after that, I wrote him a letter. Very, very nice, wonderful man. He's a great man. My kids are friends with his kids and stuff. He just knows what he knows. And I just nicely reminded him that the temple recommend is a time between me and my Heavenly Father or my heavenly parents. If he had an issue with me, to kindly take it next time outside of the recommend, but that was not a place for that conversation to be taken place. So I have taken my inner authority back. I have had people in my area, not all of them, 95% great, but the few that have asked for me to be excommunicated. They've gone to, it has got back to me from my ward. They have asked it. Of course, nothing's done. I actually went to him and said, listen, you know, if you want to know, those things do get back to people. And so if you want this place to be a loving and a belonging place, those kind of conversations get back. But I also am more confident than I used to be. And I've learned how to draw my boundaries, even within an institution. I'm not going to go into an interview that I don't know what it's about. I ask those questions. So yes, there have been some push for me, but there's also a lot of great people that would come to my defense. And at the end of the day, it's like, and I even mentioned this to my stake president and my bishop when all of this, and I said, here's the deal. I know you guys don't want to do anything to me. I know that. And I said, but if there ever came a time that you did, at the end of the day, you need to understand that I know who I answer to. And I know who I answer to is pleased. And I said, so that's going to be on you. It's not going to be on me. You're the one that's going to have to go to bed at night and think about that. And it's not me. Now, that said, I have a thicker skin than I used to. That's not the way it is for everyone. And it's devastating. And it would be devastating for me. I wouldn't ever want to lose my membership. But at the end of the day, if it happened, it's just not, I see the bigger picture. And just to make it clear, it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah,
if it did, but clearly I feel like I am really in line with the gospel. And if someone thinks that I'm not, then I guess that's their choice.
Yeah, I just struggle a little with that. Like the fact you've said people went and said that you need to be excommunicated. Again, going back to what business is it of anyone else's? Mm-hmm. Why do they feel it's their right to say this woman needs to be excommunicated? You know, and again, I keep falling back to this idea of if people would concentrate more on what they could be doing better or loving better, the focus shouldn't be on you, on what they feel. Like, I can't be okay with that. Like, that other people think, yeah, let's get this woman excommunicated. It's not okay for people to do that.
Do you know what, though, Alana? You know what I think it is? It's all based on fear. People bring fear to the table all the time. And I don't know if you guys have listened to that podcast. Glennon Doyle talked about how she was struggling because her mom was bringing fear. And she says, you can't come to my little island. I'm not going to lower my drawbridge if you're going to bring fear. But then my therapist said, we also have to take that a step further. How are we going to teach people to not have fear? They have it. They have their set of beliefs that's causing them to act that way. The only thing I can do for them now is provide them resources and love so that they can break down their fear. At the end of the day, this is how I feel. And I said this week to my husband. You know, I talked to you guys a little bit earlier, how if people go out in their tank tops or whatever, all we do is we're fearing, that we're not going to belong in that community anymore. And this is my feeling about belonging. I don't belong everywhere. And sometimes it makes me really sad. Sometimes I think I've been somewhere for 23 years in this neighborhood, and there's some people that I don't belong with anymore. Not very many, but some. At the end of the day, do you know what kind of person I want to be? I want to be someone that everyone belongs with. So the neighbor that might not like me, that thinks that I'm crazy because I have my pride flag, when I connect with them and I see a pretty flower in their yard, I want to say, oh my gosh, you're a really great gardener. That is a beautiful thing. And I want to connect at a place where we can belong. And someone post-Mormon, in Mormon, whatever, I want people, when they are with me after that, to say, I'm a better person because I spent some time with Susie today. And that to me is a human camp where we all are there. And the only thing we can do is model it. All we can do is model it. If I'm not at church all the time and people are like, oh no, what's happened to Susie? All I can model back is that I'm good and I care about you. And we have to invite people to leave their fear at the door, but we also have to give them tools on how to leave their fear at the door. They don't know how, you know?
And I think that fear often comes from, my understanding of the gospel is that key to it is, you know, you have to take your inventory. You have to be taking that hard look at yourself, asking the hard questions. We're encouraged to do that. except we don't really often talk about how difficult it is to do it. So if I take inventory and the questions that I'm asking myself mean that, maybe I'm not the person I think I am. Maybe I am being really unkind. Maybe I'm not standing in the place that the Lord is, wants me to stand, the place that I'm calling holy, but it's not the same place as He is. Mm-hmm. Look at all of these other people standing there. It's much, much easier for me to feel like I need to keep where I'm standing safe, to double down on what I've already told myself or what I've already learned to be true. And so I love how you humanize, that's one of the goals of this podcast has really been about how people are experiencing church. Doctrine is interpreted so differently by everyone. Everyone's having different experiences. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you're going through this religion in this life.
What's funny too is that COVID has definitely made its mark on the world and in all of our groups. And so it used to be that most families in the church could tout on testimony meeting, all my kids have been married in the temple, or my kids have all served missions, or they do that. It is no longer that way. We all have families now. Like my family since COVID, half in, half out, maybe 3/4 out. We no longer can tout. I mean, this is not just a problem for LGBT. We have to figure out how we all belong. And it's just COVID, I think, was really critical in helping us to take inventory within our homes, helping us to feel like what's important. And I sat my kids down and I said, listen, I've got a son and his wife at BYU. I have my ones that, I have some that are like, this is nuts. And I just finally sat them all down and I said, listen, we're going to love and support one another on our different paths, all of us. And if someone's kid is being baptized or doing that, we're going to be there cheering. And if someone's doing this, we're going to be there cheering. Because at the end of the day, life is about relationships. And I think we forget in our church because we define it like, oh no, my kid did this, and I'm going to spend all my waking hours getting everyone in the church praying for my kid, but you're not having a relationship with your kid. And it's just, I just think it's an eye-opening thing. The LGBT stuff, like I said, I would love for you to have George and Allison on here one time, because their story is beautiful. And what they're doing, talk about a family that was so strong in the gospel. He's Jesus on steroids, George is. And yeah, it may look a little bit differently with their attendance or things like that, but what they're doing with Peculiar is preparing this grassroots effort for an unconditional family. That's what is. We're gathering an unconditional family. And he doesn't care how long it takes. He doesn't care if it's one person at a time. And it's just, I don't know. We don't have the corner on all of it. We're a teeny little religion when you look at all of the world. And I ask God all the time, I'm like, why did you plant me with the Mormons? Like, what did I do in heaven? Sometimes I get so mad and I'm like, what did I do wrong? Because sometimes
you were the righteous one. Remember?
Yeah, exactly.
I know, right?
Sometimes I get a little mad, like, I don't want to be in this world that's so hard, that I don't always fit into, that it's difficult. But then I just think to myself, I was planted here, bloom where you're planted. I'll do it my way. This is where I was planted. It doesn't mean it's the end all be all truth of everything. But for some reason, God needs us to do some work amongst the Mormons. And this is where some of our work is. And at the end of the day, every faith's going to bring their best and most important truths together. They're going to diss their worst history, their worst teaching moments, and we're going to become a human body of our heavenly parents. And we're just one little piece.
I love that. So that's going to kind of take us up to where we are now. I think we're counting this in weeks. So a few weeks ago, you posted something that I found so impactful that, again, it's one of those moments that reaches out across to the other side of the world, that's impacting so many people. if I allude to the post that you shared on your Facebook page asking for the names of allies, would you tell our audience what that was, what happened there?
It's weird because I just had a thought driving home. It was like right next to my house, and I was just like, what the hard part for me is that a few of us, because we have named ourselves as safe spaces, we get a lot of people that reach out to us. I mean, like, I don't even minister in my ward anymore because I feel like I need to be ministering. When someone reaches out to me, I need to leave Thursday night open to go out to dinner with them or to have these conversations. And so I was overwhelmed that day because I had had several people reach out. And sometimes they're from different states and sometimes they're from different countries. And, and I was just like, and I'm, the only thing I'm good at is connecting. It's not like I'm a masterful, like I know stuff. I don't know stuff. But if someone says, oh my gosh, someone's struggling with this, I know someone. I'm like, okay, I'll connect you with that person. Okay, I'll connect you with this person. And I thought, I know a million allies. And if people just knew and they could put their name and a face, that maybe when someone reaches out to me, I can say, you don't think there's any allies in Utah County, but there is. And if they can see Provo, Orem, or different cities in different places, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. And for me, it was just a plea for help for myself, because I was like, I know a million of these people, but we need to get their names out there. And so I didn't think many people would respond. And then it just went response. And you know what I think it is? I think when we feel like we're a tribe, like we can be like, I can put my name with 100 other names. Then I had people in my family that put their names on there. I had people that I never thought would put their names on there. It's kind of a groupthink mentality. Like we can do this if we can do it together. So that's all it was. It was just this random thought because I was kind of frustrated. Like I had someone reach out and I'm like, I know there's a million people in Utah County that wish that everyone knew they were allies. So that was it, and so.
So there's another ally who's commenting on our YouTube page. LC is in Utah County and is an ally. So what did it look like? Because Alana hasn't seen this post. In the UK, most of our audience are very new to a new on space. They probably haven't seen it. What does your post look like now?
Well, I had to finally put 4 groups into a set of 4. And you have to understand, I'm not super good at computer stuff. So I do it the hard way. I'm like, cut, paste. That's all I was in Costa Rica at the time. Most of them were coming. And I'm like, and then this cute lesbian lady said, can I put it on a spreadsheet for you so we can organize it? So I got all these kind of helpers, but it just grew to, I think we're getting close to maybe 1,000. And so many of them are in Utah. So you can imagine, with everyone else that's starting to contribute, it just grew. And particularly for Peculiar, that was kind of the goal. It was the goal. It was right. I'm in Costa Rica with George, and he's the person that's over Peculiar, he and Allison. And I just said, we need a pledge. And George, like right then, types one up, because he just is master with language. And we're like, I think people need to know that they can be part of this team, this new camp, that we all sense of belonging. And once again, doesn't it go back to belonging? Like I can belong in a place. So yeah, it just kind of spread. I don't think it's gone crazy. I mean, I think there's a million more people that would like to put their name to something, but I think it's a start. I think it was really refreshing.
We're going to put this on blast too from the UK side, because there are so many UK allies here. Unfortunately, the screen share has been a little bit temperamental, or I would show our audience this, but I would like to kind of give you guys a sense of this. So you had posted, this is the Peculiar Pledge. Do you have that handy to be able to take us through what that is? While you're looking that up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this up too. So this is the rainbow colors, and these are all of these people with the names of allies and where they are. I'm just going to slide this across, and these names just keep coming. Just just keep coming. There's so many names now.
That's amazing.
Beautiful, right? And there are people are still reaching out to ask you to add their names, right? Yeah.
And we do, like with this week we have this thing called Allies and Appetizers, and we have someone speak, and anyone can Zoom into it. So it's hard in the UK because it's at 6:30 at night here, but we're going to have it recorded. And so people can say, hey, I'm going to host Allies and Appetizers, and you can at least get the speaker and have these discussions. My dear friend's daughter came out as trans, and she brought her boyfriend at the time along with her. And the first thing he said to her was, this is kind of scary. And do you think kind of those terms that we use, do you think this is going to encourage her to be trans? Because he was so scared about it. Well, he got to this meeting, and by the end of the night, this guy was in tears, and he's high-fiving everyone like, I am an ally now, And so as far as the pledge, so one of those slides that you said was what our program is, which that one, if I read it, it says, Peculiar is an ally development and education organization. We recognize the needs for allies across many spaces and places to provide healthy support and outcomes for our LGBTQ family. So often we find our LGBTQ plus family in trauma and need of triage. It is our focus and commitment to stand at the top of the cliff as sentinels of protection rather than as an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and to prevent these outcomes. Through our partnership with Brigham and Women's Hospital and Dr. Michael Ferguson of Harvard, we will enjoy the benefits of the best research and educational design to provide resources for faith, families, communities, educators, therapists, and medical professionals. We believe we should be allies, especially in the places that have the greatest potential for harm. And that's our goal. There's so many things out there that are so good, like the hotlines for suicide or things like that. But the focus, that focus needs to be before we get to that point. We need the education and focus for people to join in before we get to that point. And so the pledge, so we have this beautiful research going on at Harvard that is taking place, which is great. But the pledge says, as an ally to the LGBTQ plus community, I commit to reach down and lift up this community with love, compassion, and empathy. I commit to grab the hand of greater light and knowledge that stands above me so that I can gain greater understanding and the greater capacity to love. As an ally, I humbly acknowledge that I have much to learn and more to love, and I choose to follow this path forever. I commit to build the bridge between where I am and where the community is, supporting and celebrating a community that is unified in unconditional love. And, the beauty of our faith, one of the best principles we have is personal revelation and knowing that we have continual revelation. We have greater light and understanding. And maybe it's up to us to push that greater light and understanding. Just because the whole body doesn't feel it yet, the grassroots part does. And maybe it's our example to spread that so the greater body can also start to feel it and to figure it out. I believe it will come. I hope it comes sooner than later.
I do too. And I mean, most definitely only in the space of 3.5 years, the landscape has really changed.
Yes.
Things are getting better, but I'm also very, very aware that for all we haven't been podcasting and live streaming for very long, we've only spoken about the LGBTQIA plus community, and we've spoken about being allies. We've covered this subject so many times already, and that's something we're continuing to try and amplify and to learn to listen. But most of the people that are experiencing our faith have been really hurt, or are traumatized, or are trying to figure out where they fit in, or are suicidal, or haven't been able to make it work for all sorts of reasons. And so, it's there aren't a lot of people in the UK who are speaking up. So when there are some people, and that's so exciting and heartening, that wouldn't have happened a few years ago. So I guess you know, I kind of feel like part of my role as an ally is to make sure that I'm not speaking for people, that we're amplifying their voices where they are heard. And so I love that you're creating these spaces to bring people together, and where we can listen, where it's their voices that are being heard.
Right. And I think it's important, even in anything that you're learning, to just say, I am learning. I might mess up. I might say something wrong. I might do something wrong. But what does the gospel teach us that sometimes our institution is very poor at? It teaches us to make restitution. It teaches us to repent. It teaches us to change. And as we grow into these new spaces, sometimes we might mess up a little bit. And sometimes I think that's why people are scared. They think, well, I don't know enough about this to be any good at it. We don't have to be good at it. You just have to have a heart that's willing, a heart that's willing to learn. I remember one time on a big public post, I messed up big time. And a lady, a lesbian lady kind of came after me. And my old Susie Mormon self wanted to defend and be prideful and be like, how dare you ridicule me. But instead, I reached out to her privately and I said, I'm really sorry. And would you teach me? Can you teach me how to do this differently and how I can fix this? And she became a very nice, beautiful friend of mine because she didn't see me as a threat. She saw me as someone that was trying to learn, and she was willing to forgive my mistake and help me along. And then after that, she's like plugging me everywhere, you know? So I just think it just takes humility, and it takes recognition that we're not going to do everything perfectly. I mean, heck, if our institutional church could recognize that in themselves, these members would not be leaving. They could say, our church history has been crappy. We've done crappy at this. We've done blah, blah, blah. But our heart is changing. We want to get further light and knowledge. We want to be more like our Savior. Please forgive us. Oh my gosh, people, even if they were mad at that stuff, might come back in just because they want to belong, because it's a good place to belong, you know?
It may be a time when, because as I'm framing what I'm going to say, I'm thinking this may need a content warning. I don't know. We'll see how this goes. But I'm not sure if my mum is still. She was in the chat earlier on. So hi, mum, if you're still watching, and she is not a member of the church. So this is all really interesting to her. But Alana and I have been having some conversations over this past few days about, we have this angel child that is in a member of our family who we love. And it is so easy for us as family members to jump way far ahead in the dialogue. So we have this trans child, and I think really quickly people can jump to gender reassignment surgery and future families, and before you know it, you're 20 years down the line, and the child that you're supporting is, they're nowhere near there yet. And so I think sometimes it's about us. It's always about us listening, but sometimes it's about us, sort of taking that time and not projecting all of our questions onto someone who's figuring it out in that moment. The way I was sort of likening it the other day was we have a child who will use a type of sign language for communication, and it's really easy when you learn something new. You really want to, it's such a Mormon thing, isn't it? When you learn something, you want to share it with the world. You get excited about what you know. So before you know it, you could be interacting with my child and your hands are doing all of these signs, and my child is so overwhelmed. Like, what are you doing? And it's just too much. And I think often what we do is, as allies, we just want to talk about all of these things that we've learned, and isn't this so good? And we're still not listening.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. It's really important to, and I tell this to kids too. Often I've had kids come to me and say, well, I wish that you were my mom because you would have just accepted me and this and that. And you know what I say back to them? I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you right here and now. If one of my kids came out even today, I would have to readjust what I thought about that child. What if it was my daughter? I pictured her marrying a man. I pictured her doing this. I pictured her all of these things. I said, I would have to take time. And would I shun them? No. Would I do any of that? I would embrace them, but I would still need time. I would need time to shift my brain to what her brain's always thought, because mine hasn't thought that. I had no idea. And I always say, so be patient as your parents and people are processing information too, that they are doing it in a time frame that maybe you got a lot more time to figure some things out. And I think that as allies, we have to be patient with each other, as even allies are trying to figure it out, as parents are trying to figure out, as their kids are trying to figure out. Because at the end of the day, we're all doing our best to try to learn, and we're not always going to have our shining moments at it. Sometimes we're just going to mess up. And clearly, messing up is fine. As you know, my friend, she's not my therapist, but she is one. She's this amazing, she's this super cool lesbian lady. She was actually, her name's Deb. She was as big of a deal as Steve Young was when he played football. She actually played in your guys' area as a professional women's basketball player back in the day. She's a therapist now, and so she relates a lot of therapy to
we may know Deb. She said maybe Deb, who we've spent a bit of time in a group with, so it may be the same person that we're talking about, but yeah,
maybe. But she says, you know, everybody is going to foul each other, and in sports, the intentional fouls are very rare, intentional ones, but unintentional fouls happen all the time. It's basically, most of the sport is an unintentional foul. So we're going to all foul each other at times. And sometimes it's really important to call your own foul. I just fouled you. I didn't mean to, but I need to learn from it. Sometimes it's important to call someone else on a foul and say, you fouled me, but I know you didn't mean it, but let's talk about it. And so I think that if we're gracious and have enough love for each other, we can be good about calling our own fouls and fouls on each other, knowing that we don't do it intentionally. We're all raised differently. We all have just different parts of our makeup, our life situations, our past traumas, so many things that play into how we react to one another. So we just got to be how the Savior was. You know, my son was in The Chosen. I don't know if you know the Chosen that's out about Christ. It's a non-denominational series that's out.
Yes, I have heard of it. Yeah.
It's the most amazing depiction of Christ you will ever see. He's the Christ I want to go hiking with on Saturdays. The way that he's depicted in this series, you seriously would be like, I'll sell my home today and I will get my tent and I will follow you, because he's so cool and he's funny and he's just cool. And my son is in that series. He was able to be an extra in the series. And as I look at this series and I think, this is the Christ. They are depicting Christ as someone that he's just so sweet. When anybody messes up, he makes kind of little funny jokes about it, and he sees beyond. It's that level 6 I'm telling you about, like the sees beyond what we are, and he sees where we're at. And I don't know, I just think that it's a worthy goal. It's a worthy goal just to say, hey, we can do this together, but let's just admit that we're going to do it wrong sometimes.
We are. But like you say, when you know better, you do better. And okay, so what next? What next for you? What next for Peculiar? And what next for the LGBTQIA community in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Okay, so I'll go with Peculiar. Since I'm heavily involved with that now, the goal in Peculiar is we're just going to keep slowly growing. Harvard Medical School and this other group is putting together the most amazing teaching tools that is going to be spread to businesses. Like as a nurse, I'm a nurse, we'll be able to teach it to groups of doctors and nurses. It's just going to be the most wonderful educational tool that I think has even been out there, because we're standing at top of the cliff. That's where we're standing. We have amazing people that are being our speakers and doing all of those things. So I'm going to push forward with that and give it my all. I have a lot of, I feel like I'm just going to give a lot to the LGBTQ community for the rest of my life. Not because an obligation I feel, but because I find heaven there. It's this strange, I tell people this all the time. I'm like, if you want to find heaven on earth, you should come in my space because you will find heaven on earth. I get scared to die because I don't think heaven is going to be quite as good as what I get here now. So I really, really think if we can find heaven on earth, find it. For me personally, I always tell people that I'm fluid. I may say something today where I may be upset a little bit. I'm not going to be that way forever. I don't know where I'll be tomorrow. Where I'm at with the church right now is I am a big tent gospel person. I will always be that. As far as institutionally, I think there's a lot of things that are wrong. I think there needs to be a lot of changes. I'm not trying to say a leader or people are wrong, but I think there's some things wrong. And I think the more we amplify our voices together on some of those things, I think they need to hear that there are people suffering. When I visited the church office building to go talk to them, I compare it to the Truman Show. Has everyone seen the Truman Show with Jim Carrey? Okay, so you guys have to understand when you walk into the church office building, music is playing, church music 24/7. Everyone's in their white shirts and ties. Their 24/7 reality mostly comes from a building that's what they're seeing. That's a lot of feedback that's like everything's right in Zion. And I know they know it's not, but I also know that they don't know some of the really hard day-to-day stuff that people are going through. And so I truly believe that the more people help them to understand. My son said the other day, he looked at me and he says, Mom, they have let us down. They have let my generation down. And these kids don't necessarily know where to turn. They're either turning with a non-belief in God, because we were taught our whole lives that we have the only true church. So here they're going away and not even knowing what to do. Most of them not even turning into another faith. And they feel really let down. So I think we need to help our leaders understand that we feel let down. They owe us more. You know, as far as the LGBTQ community, I feel like, I'm going to give you an example. I had 4 different people come to me at 4 different times. They didn't know each other. God is aware of them. He knows the bigger plan. They spent their last day in the temple, all of them with different situations, some going in just saying, what do I do? Others going in knowing it was their last time. One kid, the 4th person, reached out to me and he said, Susie, I went to the temple. I don't want to leave the church. I love the temple. And he said, and while I was there, and before he said it, I said, wait, before you tell me what you heard, I'm going to tell you what I heard from other people. And I want you to tell me if it was similar. I said, did your heavenly parents say to you, you need to go and find the person that you love and get a companion? You need to, this is your last time in the temple for now. This is not your mess to clean up. It is other people's mess to clean up. I need you to go and be happy. This is not your problem. And he started to cry because it was exactly that same way for him. And all 4 of them had the same experience of like Heavenly Father, Heavenly Mother saying, I've got you, but I need you to move over here for now so that your health can remain intact, so that you can be happy. And it's going to be okay. We're going to get this cleaned up. And so for them, I would say, if you're comfortable being in our spaces with us, come with me. I'll sit by you. If you're not, I'll provide you a space where you can feel belonging. They're going to be okay. But all we need to do for them is represent them in all of our spaces. And we need to be okay where they're at. We don't need to say, no, get back to church. We don't need to say any of that. We just need to become a comfortable place of belonging while we all clean up the mess. And we have a mess to clean up. And
I feel like it's worth mentioning, I think, how that is so hard to hear for so many members of our church. That is sacrilegious, that is challenging to their faith. It's offensive, and people are allowed to disagree with it. You're allowed to have your feelings. My parenting style is one of, if I've hurt you, then I need to know what that is. I am not always going to be the highest version of myself. And so if there's something I can do better, will you tell me? And those conversations that we have where, you know, if I've messed up and I've had to, you know, tell my kids, I did not do the best job as a mother there. I didn't even do a good job as a mother there. I'm really sorry I let you down. And our relationship has benefited so much because I have to be able to repent. In addition, my relationship with my heavenly parents has had to have those same conversations. I've had to tell God that I'm angry that he is putting so much on the shoulders of people that I love, or that my mother is silent and she's gone, and why are you not here? I am so angry at the injustice in the world, and can't that just be okay? And I've learned that while it's tough to hear as a mother, that also we can handle it, that God especially can handle it, that our mother in heaven, that's the language that she speaks, is that of understanding our pain. She walks in those holy spaces. And so if someone is telling us that we can talk about a church that can be better, that should be better, it's part of the plan of happiness, that we're all going to be better. So of course our church institution has to be better. It makes sense to me. So yeah, I just wanted to share my big thoughts on that.
Well, it's interesting because you have to generationally, and you have to break it down. Halfway through my parenting, our parents and the leaders, my husband gave a talk when he was bishop about how to motivate someone. And people motivate with fear, people motivate with duty, and you can motivate people with love. Fear works. You can use it as, I used it as a parent in the beginning. I did what I thought you're supposed to do as a parent. That's all I knew. I had to learn to shift. Duty works. Kids do it all the time. It's my duty to serve a mission. That motivates people. Fear, our leaders came from a generation that fear was a motivator. You tell them to do it and they're going to do it. But in the end, the only thing that motivates people to truly belong and stay and be a part of the solution is love. And our leaders are of a generation where duty and fear were used a lot. And they think that, and it worked for them, but it's not working anymore. Our youth and our younger generations are way more enlightened than any other generation. And they're saying, don't you dare fear me into something. They're automatically saying that. And so if we do not learn to motivate through love, we're not going to make it. It's a pride cycle. I'll just say it. Look at our own book.
Yes.
It's boom, boom, pride. And who is to say that we can't be a part of a pride cycle that our own scriptures talk about?
Absolutely.
And so
I want to amplify the words of our brother in the gospel, David Archuleta. Is that how we pronounce David's last name?
Archuleta. Archuleta.
Okay,
yeah.
Because American Idol wasn't over here when he was doing his thing, so I've only ever read David's name. I've never heard it pronounced. So but obviously, if you're a Latter-day Saint, you've probably heard his name. So he was a finalist, right, on American Idol back in the day, served a mission, and has been, just using his voice, producing wonderful music that's uplifting and inspiring, and he's hugely popular. Now, what was it, about maybe 10 years ago he was on American Idol? It was a really long time.
A long time ago, yeah.
It was okay. That 10 years is not a really long time, but you hear what I'm saying in the world of LGBTQ issues. Yeah, it's an eternity ago. So I want to share this because I feel like this. I feel like when we read his statement, that it's a call for us to do something, to be someone. So David said, I like to keep to myself, but also thought this was important to share because I know so many other people from religious upbringings feel the same way. I've been open to myself and my close family for some years now that I'm not sure about my own sexuality. I came out in 2014 as gay to my family, but then I learned I somewhat have similar feelings for both men and women, so identify as being bisexual. I'm still trying to figure things out, as I also have learned I don't have as many sexual desires and urges as most people, which works, I guess, because I have a commitment to save myself for marriage, which people call asexual when they don't experience sexual urges. There are people experiencing the same feelings of being LGBTQIA+. I know that's a lot of letters that a lot of people don't understand, but there are a lot of unique experiences people feel and live that make them feel isolated and alone that are represented. A lot of them wrestling to follow their beliefs that are so important to them, as I have. I don't know what to make of it, and I don't have all the answers. I just invite you to please consider making room to be more understanding and compassionate to those who are LGBTQIA+, and to those who are part of that community, and trying to find a balance with their faith, which is also a huge part of their identity, like myself. I think we can do better as people of faith and Christians, including Latter-day Saints, to listen more to the wrestle between being LGBTQIA+ and a person of faith. There are more than you may realise going through that wrestle after all the misunderstandings that come with it. I don't think it should come down to feeling you have to accept one or the other. For me, to find peace, the reality has been to accept both are real things I experience and make me who I am. I've yet to figure out what this means, but I appreciate you listening to this personal matter. Again, I don't feel comfortable sharing it, but I felt I needed to bring more awareness to people in my same situation and let you know you are not alone. You can be part of the LGBTQIA+ community and still believe in God and his gospel plan. And people who don't experience what's outside of the norm, being just heterosexual, I plead that you be more understanding to people who experience and struggle with things that you may not experience and understand yourself. I've tried for almost 20 years to try and change myself until I realised God made me how I am for a purpose. And instead of hating what I have considered wrong, I need to see why God loved me for who I am, and that it's not just sexuality. So many other traits of who I am come from how I've been created. If other people choose to live differently than what you've been raised to believe is right, please have compassion, because it's most likely been an exhausting journey for them to be okay with the feelings they have and never have been able to change. Perhaps they weren't supposed to try and change the way they were created to be. Even if you're left with so many more questions with faith and sexuality like me, I believe being open to both questions and to faith is how we receive answers. God blesses those who ask. So let's keep asking and seeking and having compassion and patience. Thank you for listening.
So beautiful.
I want to ask what you take from David's post, and that if a very busy person like David were to be listening, because people like David are listening, what would you say?
Well, number one, I would say believe them. He has personal revelation. If we believe in personal revelation, believe what people tell you. And number two, I'm gonna expand on this, and this is in your neck of the woods. And it gets me really emotional. And it's not something that I could share, even in a testimony meeting, because it was my own. But I was in Ireland watching my son play soccer. And I'm weird, and I pick out places to VRBOs that are off the beaten path. And we went to this place that was this castle, and we drove up to it, and it looked like in a haunted house. And my husband's like, we're getting out of here. There's nobody here. And I'm like, let me just go look inside and we'll leave. I'll take the loss. So I went and looked inside, and this little cute couple came out, and they were refurbishing it in the middle of a little teeny tiny town in Ireland. And they'd redone the West Wing. And so we stayed there in a place that had, I mean, it was dark at night and it was freezing cold at night. I went in my cute room and put my coat on and my big thing, my blanket on. And when I was there, that was like 3 years ago. It gets me emotional. And I knelt down and I said, God, I'm alone here in Ireland in the freezing cold. And my husband, of course, is already asleep because, you know, he's asleep by 9 o'clock. And I said, and I've got a few questions. And I said, I'm going to ask them and I'm going to wait for an answer. And I said to my heavenly parents, I said, how do our LGBTQ family fit into your plan? I know they fit, but I'm very angry about it right now. And I'm very angry about what I've learned about it that doesn't seem to fit, doesn't seem to resonate with my soul. And I said, I'm asking you to tell me how they fit. And I went to sleep. And I ended up waking up at about 2 a.m, just flooded with information. And I went on a drive that next morning and I told my husband, like, everything that came into my mind in the middle of that cold night. And he says, oh, you've got to write that down. And I said, this is not stuff that I said, people would look at me if I repeated some of the stuff that I said and they'd be like, you're crazy. But it was mine and it was given to me. And after that point, I never looked back with a question about how they fit in and how much they are a planned, essential part of our human family, and how they fit in before, how we all fit in after. I never worried again about what heavens, our little line of heavens that we present. I never worried about it because we don't have all the answers. We pretend like we have all the answers, but we don't. And if we're a place of continual revelation, personal revelation, we need to believe people when they get it. And if their revelation is to step out for a while, that's their revelation. And that's where God needs them to be. If their revelation is to be in for a while and to do that, that's where they need to be. And it's all going to come together. So I would just say, believe people when they have those experiences. Don't question David. I heard someone say, oh my gosh, he's bi and he's asexual and he's this, like, what is he? And I'm like, what does it matter to you? Let him tell his experience. Let him unveil what he's feeling and listen to him. You know, just listen.
Alana, how is your voice doing? Do you feel like you can share what your response is to I feel very aware that I'm speaking as allies responding to a person's post of coming out. Do you have anything that you would like to see in support of David, or what you feel that he's asking for from the community here?
Nothing like putting me on the spot. Again, for me, as I've always said, for me, it always just comes back to love. That's, for me, you know, having that love for someone, you know, it shouldn't matter, you know, colour, sexual preference, you know, we just love people. You know, when you look at the Saviour, isn't that what he did? I've said this before, you know, like, and it didn't matter to him who you were, what life you came from, you know, and I guess just from listening to people is just, you know, trying our hardest to, I guess, can't say, you know, like, I don't think we'll ever come to a full understanding because it's possibly not our lived experience, but just to have a little more compassion and understanding for what people go through. You know, like, I guess, you know, I have mental health, but not everyone has mental health. Not everyone's experienced what I've experienced. You know, it's something I used to say to people, yeah, I know how you feel, and, you know, but we truly don't know how people feel. You know, we've maybe had a very similar experience, but it's not the same as theirs, although it may be similar. So, yeah, I just always come back to love, you know, just love people, you know, and I agree with, you know, Susie, the church, and I've said it multiple times, the church has a long way to go. They need to fix it. They need to fix it, and they need to fix it now. you know, I always go back to the comment, you know, in one of our first podcasts where they said, what was it they said again about, you know, don't use us as an object lesson, you know, and that kind of hit hard, you know, that it shouldn't have to be this way. We shouldn't be having to teach people how to accept people and how to love people. You know, I guess I'm struggling with exactly what I want to say, and I hope I'm coming across where I'm trying to go. Like, for me, from day one, it should have been accepted within the walls of our church. I don't see why we're having to try and find a way to love these people and to include them. You know, I always go back. I hate when I hear the church saying, and I'm being brutally honest here, I hate it. And it makes me so angry when they say that there is a place for these people in the church. I see where they're coming from, but there is not a place in the church for them. There's only a place if they then, you know, don't act upon their feelings or they don't date. They have to then go through life without companionship, without that special someone to be fully accepted in the church. And I just don't agree that that's God's way. It's not my God's way. I don't think that's the way he would have it. And so I just think we shouldn't have to be having this. They shouldn't be having this experience of trying to help members to accept them and love them. And I guess I'm warbling now, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it should never be this way. It should never have been this way from day one.
I don't think we can ever underestimate, you know, the power of the words that you always come back to is that we just have to love. That is the most important thing. And I just want to say that there is a place in my church. There is a place in my church. That's the church that I'm a member of. That's the church that we are building. And I know that is an extremely problematic statement for people who are having other lived experiences, but I commit to be an ally and to make that place become a reality. I want to amplify the voice of the words of Leon in the chat, who is a friend of the podcast, and we love you, Leon. We see you, and you're amazing. I feel like Leon's words here really have, for me, got to the heart of what David's post was all about. Leon says, all we want is love and a little compassion, and sometimes a listening ear without judgment. And what really gets me is the fact that we know that we walk through this church preaching love, preaching possibilities, and what a wonderful people we are, what a welcoming space. We are a missionary church. We're all about that welcome. That David couldn't assume that he would have that, to have to plead for love and understanding. Please don't judge me. Please try and understand. I think we all, in every circumstance, need to take that request to our heart and commit that we will try to do that, and that we will stand with David, and that we do, as his sisters in the gospel, we do bless his journey, every step of it.
Can you guys also imagine for David? I mean, 2 years ago, a whole bunch of us and all of these LGBTQ young adults went to his concert. And he reminds me of my oldest son. David Archuleta is without guile. Like, he has a gentle teddy bear heart. And can you imagine how it felt? One of his biggest audiences are our LDS people. He's doing these things for the church. You know, they're asking him to do all this stuff. Can people really imagine the weight he has been carrying, knowing that his life could change in a minute? Because, and I don't think it's about money to him. I don't think he cares that maybe he could lose his fan base, or maybe he could do that. He really wants to do the right thing for the right reason. So the turmoil that he must have felt in building up to be able to do that. You know, he's spoken at North Star and some of those things, and affirmation as what people thought was a straight person, trying to motivate, trying to give love. the whole time knowing in his own heart he was one of them. And I don't know if people understand how much pain he might have been going through as he stood in those spaces. Just give him, I hope people not only rally behind him, but spend more time listening to him and becoming a fan and not moving away. Like I think God directed him at the right time, right now, to say, use your voice, you know.
When you started off with talking about that fifth Sunday lesson, and you had invited all of those who had someone in their lives who was LGBTQ to stand. I think to just revisit that moment, that as we're thinking about David, that every single one of us is going to know or love someone who is LGBTQ plus and hasn't come out and is still figuring out all of those things. We are all going to I'm just so aware of the number of people who, since in the short time since we're podcasting, the people who reach out to us and our other, team of Brit Venger podcasters that are, just doing amazing work, reaching out because of one thing, that we are listening. Mm-hmm. So yeah, could we be kind? Susie, this has been an incredible talk. You're amazing, and I'm so inspired by the work that you've been doing. Again, we're going to put on blast that peculiar pledge, because we need people to be signing that. That is awesome. Can you imagine if you are in David's situation and you are wrestling with your identity and knowing that there are all of these people who are your team, who are on your side? That's a powerful thing. So I'm going to make sure that we're sharing that in our show notes. Could you maybe share some final words to take us out?
Yeah. I've said a lot of it before, but I don't know if you guys know this, but my two youngest children are Black. And this year was hard. During COVID, it was really, really hard. It was the first time, my kids have been very sheltered by my privilege, by my white privilege. And yes, they've experienced spots of racism but they still were protected by so much love and goodness. And 2020 brought right in my face how fragile and how quickly something could turn on my own children. And last year we had a Black Lives Matter peaceful protest that actually was put on by the LGBTQ community. And all of these parents, it was like everything that I had been experiencing got turned and given back to me. And the people that gave it back to me were all of these parents of gay kids, all of the people in the LGBTQ community. They're the ones, the very first people that came to me and said, how are you doing? How are your kids doing? And I felt so blessed, because the marginalized know how the marginalized feel. And I was just so, so grateful that, everyone's always saying, oh, Susie, how are you in this space? And you're so blah, 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 and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, I said, in reality, I think I needed people to be there for me. And they were, and they're the ones that showed up in a time that I didn't think would exist in my life. I didn't think that I would feel so sad at times for what my children, my own Black children, may have to face at times, or what they have faced, or what people in the past have faced. And so I'm just so grateful that these people are in my life, and I want to share them. I don't want to keep them all to myself. It is selfish of me to keep so many wonderful people in my world. And that's half the reason I wanted to put out the thing for allies, is because I think there's a million people where when the person that reached out to me that lived in Utah County, I knew there was a million people. I don't want to keep him just to myself. I would love to because they're so amazing. But I know there's people out there that want to be a part of this heaven that's being created. And so I just encourage people to dig deep down and to challenge their fears and understand that if they can step outside those fears, even in their ward buildings, in their families, in their businesses, if they can just be brave enough to say, hey, I'm with you, I stand with you, you will be a ripple effect of 10 more people in your church, in your business, in your family that wanted to say it. They just didn't dare to say it yet. So I just challenge people to take the pledge and know that it will be something that will increase the joy and the heaven in your life by 100-fold. And I don't think we can go to heaven unless we learn how to create heaven. So why wait? Why are we waiting and for another day when in the end of the day, we pray for it that there will be a heaven, right? We want there to be a heaven. But if there's not, let's create it now and let's make every day one. And so that's what I would leave.
I love that. Thank you so much. Alana, do you, just before we say goodbye to our audience, do you want to share a blessing for our friend?
No cat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Daisy, like I always remind our audience every time we do this, Daisy is an active, wonderful child, and Alana manages to fit parenting in around, full-time podcasting. She is amazing. So, yeah.
No, there I wasn't, because I just showed everybody that I was annoyed at her.
No, you're perfect.
No, but it's just like, I've asked her, she's already disturbed me a few times. I'm like, please, can you just let me get this podcast done? And
the audience loves to get a glimpse of Daisy in action.
Bring normalcy. It's beautiful.
Absolutely. This is what it's all about. So yeah, just in case you missed that, just Alana, will I let you?
Well, yeah, I just want to thank you very much. It's always great to hear people who view things, I guess, the same as I do. And we just really inspired. I've actually took a few notes if any time I was looking down, that's what it was. Yeah, just we want to bless your journey, and just we're with you. Anything we can do to support your cause and what you're trying to achieve, we're with you. We stand with you.
Well, we're going to come over. We're going to come over to there because George and Allison and I, we all like to travel. And so when we get over there, we'll have a huge allies and appetizers night that we can.
That would be incredible. And Leon, absolutely. Did you hear that? Leon has been hoping for something like this, trying to create a space for something like this. So that is awesome. We would love that to happen. Audience, thank you as always for all of your support. Thank you for just the amazing things that you do. We are going to send out with the show notes when this goes out in podcast form. And when you check it again in the replay in YouTube, you will be able to see links to sign that pledge, to find out more about the work of Peculiar, and some of the links, some of the podcasts that Susie has mentioned tonight. Thank you so much for your time, Susie. Don't forget that you can like our page on Facebook, continue the discussion there, please. You can also follow us on YouTube, where you can get updates of whenever we're going to be posting next. Susie, will we see you soon? We'll be able to have a chat again soon. We've got some other things we want to talk about, right?
Okay. We'd love
that. That will be awesome. So good night, everyone. And thank you so much for your time tonight. We will see you again next week.
Good night.